All right, we're almost ready for our final panel today. But before we do that, I actually just wanted to announce the winner of that awesome X-Mini speaker. The person who tweeted the most with close to 80 or a little over 80 tweets. Hopefully he's in the room. If he's not, we'll just go down a list and give it to whoever is below. So Christo Andreev, is he in the house? He is in the house. Hands of applause. Good job, buddy. Next time you come and show us how it works, yeah? Ooh, Twitter.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Good job once again. Woo. All right. We are ready for the final talk. It's execution, stupid. The Oxford comma, is it execution stupid or not?
The Oxford comma.
My good friend Max Gurvits is going to lead this one. Just let me introduce you. He doesn't need much introduction, but still, nevertheless. Max is an entrepreneur turned investor based in Sofia, Bulgaria, which I think is a fallacy. You're all over the place nowadays.
Cheapest rents are over here.
Right, exactly.
Big secret.
You fly all the time. I've seen you pretty much every single conference on the globe. After co-founding and exiting an online legal service company in the Netherlands back in the day, Max was one of the founding of 11 Startup Accelerator, which you've seen plenty of today. He then turned to an angel private investments and is currently a VC partner at Teres Capital and mentors at Seedcamp, LAUNCHub, Happy Farm, as many other accelerators. Generally is passionate about expanding the regional entrepreneurship ecosystem in the region.
Did I write that? Or?
Probably. I just wrote it for you. Good luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You know, guys, what's the... Don't clap yet. Do it at the end. You know, guys, what's the hardest thing in the world? Making money with startups, investing in them, building companies. That's really hard. The second hardest thing is being on stage as the last person during a conference. So this means that I have to be, more powerful, shorter. So hopefully I'm not gonna bore you. It is the execution stupid. I know we're in the Balkans, so a lot of people tend to get offended if you say stuff like stupid. So don't be. This is actually a quote from a campaign slogan by Bill Clinton. He was very much a startup founder when he beat President Bush in the presidential elections. Everyone was sure that Bush would win, but Clinton came up with a very clear message like, hey, it's not about the Gulf War, it's not about ending the Cold War, the Soviet Union going down, it's about the economy, stupid. And at first it was used as an internal line in his campaign team. And then they noticed it's so popular, they started using it publicly. And if you read history right now, a lot of people say that that's actually the big reason he won the presidency, through this very, very clear message. So why do we say that about execution? Mary knows this quote because I learned it from you. I love it very much. We went to all those startup events and we still failed. Not to say anything bad about this conference or other conferences, but all the time at startup events we talk about being lean, about growth hacking, about getting to MVP and how do we get to MVP. But the reality is that the real struggle starts after that. It's executing. You can validate your product as much as you want, but getting it to a successful business where your company can get acquired or you can make a lot of money with that company, that's really the hard part. You don't have to believe me on this. Here's a famous guy who said more or less the same thing. Ideas are worth nothing unless executed. Execution is worth millions. So it's kind of this concept of execution that I want to talk about in the next 5 or 10 minutes. So this happened to me when I was building this pitch deck. I Googled in Google Images. So all my images are from Google Images. I'm not sure it's legal, but that's what I do. I Googled the startup life. The startup founder life. And this is kind of the image that I got, right? So a guy sitting in this really relaxed IKEA chair, his feet on the bed, on a laptop, he's building a startup company. In full honesty, in the very beginning, that's exactly how it should look like, and I'm sure that a lot of people in this room are in that phase right now. I was in that phase myself a number of years ago. But the really hard part is getting to the next stage. This is a statistic that is shared, by many research agencies, and more or less corresponds what I've seen in the startup world. Of everyone, if you take everyone who calls themselves a startup founder, around 10% of those people or organizations, startups, get to a point where they validate MVP. Earlier today on the panel, I give an indication of what I consider a validated minimum viable product. Those numbers differ, but generally 100,000 users if it's a consumer app, a number of big accounts if it's software, if it's enterprise software. Actually much harder with sophisticated hardware, but there are some numbers there as well. But out of those 10%, it's usually another 10%, so like 1% of the total, that actually gets to a point where you really, really execute well. Don't be mistaken on this photo. It may seem like the startup founder is obviously the guy in the bottle, right? But the other guys, you may think that he's helping them to push out the cork, but actually he's pushing it back in. So everyone is like fighting very hard against you, and that's where competition comes in place, right? This is, while you're validating your product, while you're still in the stage where you're getting to a point where you want to say that the product is validated, that's one thing. But once you actually have validated the product, then you always will have competition. MVP, we know what it is, right? If your product looks like that donut with sprinkles, your minimum viable product looks like the one without it. You get to a point where you figure out what people want, the donut, and you start adding stuff to it. The problem with execution is that you can still have that product, right? You can have that product, right? This is the donut. This is the final donut, the final product. But that dude over there doesn't actually look like a happy customer, right? Because obviously you messed up something while executing the whole story. Execution done right, this is how you actually want to sell donuts, right? It's pretty simple stuff, but the problem is that the more startups get to the point where they're validating their product, the more you see people getting in trouble with actually the brick and mortar business side of stuff. Distribution, putting your product in such a place that people can find it, marketing your product, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you wrap your hand around it, right? How do you start thinking about execution? If you Google execution, this is actually one of the first pictures that comes up, but that's not something we're talking about. The most cheesy, corny metaphor of the startup world, yes, it's a lot like dating, right? It's something we call experiential knowledge. You guys know this very well. Most of you here have fallen in love and probably have made love to someone else. You can talk about it. You can read about it, you can listen to other people's opinions about it, but until you've actually done it, you don't know anything about it, right? So that pretty much is what execution is, dating, right? I didn't say anything else. Here's a story. A friend of mine rides the metro in Rome. At that moment, he's very heavily in love with a girl who lives very far away. They see each other 2 times a year. He's sort of heartbroken. He knows that the relationship is not going anywhere. And then in the metro in Rome, he sees a girl sitting opposite to him who looks very much like that one girl that he's really in love with. Train stops at a station, not his station, but her station. She walks out, and the guy in a flash, I know the story because it's a friend of mine, in a flash he decides to chase her. So he runs out of the metro train, up the escalator, and catches up with her. And in his broken Italian, he goes like, "Can I have your number?" How the story ended, they could have lived happily ever after, but in reality, she just slapped him and, and ran off. Fact is, it doesn't matter. That guy actually executed. That's what the whole thing is about, right? It's one thing to get all your homework in place and know what you want and know what the customer wants. The other thing is to actually do the right thing when the right moment comes up. If getting to MVP, to validated product, is all about pivoting, it's all about being lean. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trashing lean. A friend of mine recently actually said that the problem with the whole lean methodology is that it teaches people about all kinds of acceptable ways to fail. That's a very negative way of looking about it. In reality, the various lean methodologies help a lot of people to actually get to the next step. But once you have validated that product, that's where you have to start getting to the next level. Executing correctly, it's all about basically 2 things. It's about distribution. So how do you make sure that those Coke trucks actually transport your product? You will need partners that already are much further advanced in distributing, and you'll need their help to distribute your product to the consumer. So for instance, if you're selling hardware, you should be in Best Buy, or if you're in the Europe, Technopolis, or other chains. And then the other thing is hiring the best team. And this is something that is probably the most overused term in the startup world, the team. I can't tell you how many times I've seen pitch decks of startups that say, "We have an amazing team." Guess what, guys? If no one on your team has been with Google or Facebook or a company like that, and you're in the app or software business, you probably don't have an amazing team. That's okay. You just have a great team. The moment you actually get to a point where you have to scale up from, let's say, 100,000 downloads, this is actually a story that I'm dealing with right now that I'm figuring out whether I should invest or not, to a point where that app should be downloaded millions of times, you will actually need someone who knows how to grow that. And that's someone who has, as we said with dating already, someone who has actually done it before. So you need to hire very aggressively. You need the superstars. This is the map of the world as it looks like, right? Probably not very familiar to you guys. But this is the reality of the business or startup world. These are countries of this world, drawn out not by their land size, which is pretty irrelevant when we talk about technology, but drawn out by their market size, by the amount of money that goes around in those markets. So if you look at this map, what do you see? You see one very big blurb in the left, which is the United States. You see two or three biggish blurbs on the right, which is China, India, and Japan. And then there's Europe, which is sort of big, but it's so fragmented that it's really hard to do business. So if you're building something, a technology that has to kick off and has to make the kind of returns that are relevant, so not like my first exit, which was about $1 million, which wasn't that much, but actually give return to the many investors that that are active here in the region, like the accelerators and the seed funds, you will actually need to go after a big market, and those are your markets. And guess what? Not only are your customers in those markets, that's important, but the people that know how to scale that technology, how to get that technology to those people, are in those markets as well. You most likely, if you don't have that experience, there's no way you can do it yourself. So you need to know who those people are, those superstars, and know how to hire them. You probably know this drawing. This is the startup curve according to Paul Graham. Where does execution come in? It's actually, I haven't changed it, so these are exactly the terms that were used in the original graph. Execution comes in right after this crash of an aptitude, like this death moment, which you hopefully survive. As you can see, the keywords are skills, networks, and funding. That's the kind of focus you need to have once you get to the moment where you have validated your product. Yes. Here's an interesting thing. So as I told you before, when I was on the seed funding panel, I spent a lot of time lately fundraising for my new fund. And when you go to Silicon Valley and you talk to people about what I'm trying to do, I'm selling my proposition. I'm raising a fund for the entire Eastern European region. Several times already, people ask me an interesting question. How many of these startups, like in places like Bulgaria, are throwaways? I wasn't sure what people meant. Like, what is a throwaway? A throwaway is something you use, products that are intended to be discarded after being used, right? So what the whole point of throwaways is the startup a real company with a real focus to succeed and kill a market and become big in something? Or is it just a vehicle for the personal development of the founders, which is fine, right? If you look at, there's a great post by a wonderful VC called Mark Suster titled To Earn or to Learn. That's the question you should be asking yourself. It's really cool to play around with lean methodologies, to validate concepts, to do all kinds of tests until you get to that validation. But once you have actually gotten to a point with your technology that a lot of people are using it, and you know what they want, and you're serving them that product, the question is, are you a throwaway? Did you just do this to learn stuff and maybe use it in all kinds of different ways in your life, or are you going to build a company? Keep in mind, when you're growing, when you're raising money, when you're going after investors, after partners, after clients, that's kind of the question that sophisticated customers and people who really know about this industry have with you. Are you a throwaway? Hopefully, you're not. And if you're not a throwaway, then you can actually join the 1% club. Remember that, right? 10% of all startups get to validation. Out of those 10% actually get to meaningful results. So with that, I promise it will be short. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is that my name?